PLESSIS Newsroom a little bit later than normal, half an hour it is. We're still live from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name is Eben, Jansen, and we're still broadcasting, well, on YouTube right now. You can also watch back a little bit later on demand. Now, today we look back on the Marikana massacre of 3 years ago, and we ask you the question at home: should the Marikana massacre be commemorated as a public holiday here in South Africa? At SABC Newsroom, of course, is where you answer that question. We'll also look at massive food wastage in South Africa, while 11 million people are said to be food insecure. If we have time later, we'll look at the scourge that is counterfeit drugs, and we'll close with a look at the culture of non-payment for services in this country. But yesterday, South Africa commemorated the 3rd anniversary of the shooting of striking mine workers in Marikana. On the 16th of August 2012, police opened fire on the miners that gathered at the now famous Koppie. The Farlam Commission of Inquiry released a report that exonerated all the major role players as well as cabinet ministers. The report recommended that Ria Piacha's fitness to hold office be investigated. No one has been found responsible or prosecuted for this incident. Members of Parliament debated the Farlam Commission of Inquiry report in the National Assembly last week, with most opposition parties calling on government to compensate the families of the miners killed. The families of the 37 mine workers killed will be represented by the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, SERI, and the Legal Resources Centre, as well as the Wits Law Clinic. Well, they filed civil claims against the Minister of Police in the High Court in Pretoria. Now, from the Socio-Economic Rights Institute of South Africa, we are joined by researcher Nadira Munshi. Good morning to you, Nadira. Thanks for joining us.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Firstly, just tell us about the civil claims. How do you see this matter now proceeding?
Okay, so the families have filed claims against the Minister of Police. SERI represents 36 of the 37 mine workers who were killed at Marikana, the families. We filed claims for loss of financial support, medical expenses. We filed claims for loss of family life, as well as emotional impact and grief. The Minister of Police now has 20 court days to respond. We're hoping that he does not oppose. And depending on the state's response, we'll proceed from there.
Now, if I can take you back to the Farlam Commission of Inquiry and then the report that came out of it, just tell us, how do you at SERI view the contents of this report?
It's very disappointing. Judge Farlam didn't find anyone or hold anyone accountable for the killings at Marikana. The killings at Scene 1 and Scene 2 on the 16th of August have been referred to for further investigation. There's a lot of content in the report, but there's no final sort of outcome about who must be held accountable, and I think the families are also quite disappointed. There's going to be, well, the report recommends a number of investigations to the public prosecutor, and we'll be following that process to see whether those investigations are taking forward or not.
How would you at SERI want this matter to be resolved?
Well, firstly, with the civil claims, we'd like the families to be compensated for the deaths of their loved ones. I think that's goal number one. Second, what we'd like is for people to be held accountable, and the policemen who fired, as well as the commanders, to be held accountable, as well as the political You
talk about accountability,
yes.
and yeah, one has to be quite careful about this accountability, what came out. You talk about the policemen that fired and so forth, but the reality of what happened at Marikana is that there are two sides to this coin. The police did not attack the miners. The police themselves were under attack in this instance.
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know. The report doesn't find that the mine workers attacked anyone. What the report finds is that on the 16th of August, the mine workers were trying to escape the police's rollout of barbed wire without a warning. And the police Nyala cut them off, so they were forced to go around the kraal, where stun grenades were fired behind them and a TRT line in front. So yes, the report finds that the police officers in front may have had reasonable means to believe that they were under attack, but it doesn't say that they were under attack, and that their response was completely out of proportion, a disproportionate use of force. And these are automatic gunfires, weapons, you know.
As a country, moving forward 3 years on, What can we learn from this? And what are the mistakes that we should never repeat after Marikana?
I think one of the biggest lessons is the militarization of the police force, and the use of automatic weapons should not be used. That's one. And I think Farnham does sort of call for an investigation and to look at the laws of the country around the use of force. But also I think that we do need to look into mining companies and their responsibility, whether they fulfill their obligations as by the social labour plans or not. Lonmin does not clearly fulfill what it says it would and commits to in the social labour plans, its housing obligations. And the report does find that, and we need to hold mining companies accountable.
Well, I thank you for joining us this morning, Nadia. Unfortunately, as you know, the show has been a little bit curtailed. I'm sure that it's a discussion that we'll have going forward once again.
Thank you so much.
Time for us to take a short little break. When we come back, we talk about food wastage and food insecurity here in South Africa.
Drogba, a footballer from Ivory Coast, was named as the third most influential celebrity in Africa.
Where I saw him display, he's a very nice player. He always make an impact.
Drogba donated his $5 million endorsement fee to the construction of a hospital in Abidjan.
Well, there are some lesser-known football stars in the continent that you haven't met.
Really?
And are deserving of more attention.
I think we will do better.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.
Welcome back. While 11 million South Africans are considered food insecure, food waste costs the country a whopping 61.5 billion rands a year. Food waste has a negative impact on the environment, the economy and wider food security. But Pick n Pay recently launched a campaign called War on Waste, which aims to not only reduce food wastage in the South African retail sector, but also create jobs. Now, joining us from our studios in Cape Town, while we're joined by Pick n Pay's General Manager for Sustainability, Andre Nal, and then the Food Bank's Managing Director, Andy du Plessis. Very good morning to you, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Andre, if I can start with you, just talk us through the campaign. We know that 1 in 4 South African households are considered food insecure. Is this the sort of backstory for this decision?
Even, you know, as a food retailer, I mean, the wastage of food is just something horrendous. You mentioned the number of people being food insecure in our country. I mean, it's 9-10 million tons of food every year that goes to waste in our country. So as a retailer, we're in a position to start to change that. I mean, we've done a lot of work up to this state already in terms of reducing food waste. But this campaign is really to put some focus on this in our stores, in our supply chain, to really bring down the amount of food that goes to waste, specifically because there are so many people in our country that are in need and doesn't have access to food.
Andy, you working with them on the War on Waste campaign. What's your experience with food retailers in general? Why aren't others also getting involved then?
I think that's a good question. I think the challenge should go out to all the food retailers and look at the food waste issues and start to set some targets. And instead of that food ending up in landfill, redirect that food to our organization, Food Bank South Africa. Our reach is able to go nationally, and we support hundreds of non-profit organizations that are verified by us. And they in turn have various programs, skills development programs, early childhood development centers, youth programs for unemployed, abused women. All of those organizations are under our auspices. They are verified, and we make sure that that food which would have gone to landfill is redirected, comes into our warehouses. We make sure that that food is good for human consumption, and we are able to reach just over 100,000 people through this network every single day.
Andre, if I can come to you, the premise of the campaign is, yes, to feed people, but just as importantly, to create jobs. we see up to 5,000 new jobs per year. Tell us what these jobs will consist of and how you're going to make it work.
So in terms of the war on waste, we've got 3 focus areas. The first one, as you said, is around food waste. But it's also around waste of talent in our country. So it's to create jobs for our young entrepreneurs, for young people in our country. And then the third component is around being more energy efficient, so, not wasting electricity. So in terms of the job creation, that's part of our store opening, so there we're creating jobs. If you think around food waste, a lot of waste actually occurs before it even gets to the store. So a lot of work there needs to get done in terms of supply chain, creating new small suppliers that are able to link into the wider supply chain, because a lot of the losses in food waste happens before it even gets to the market. There's only a small percentage that actually gets wasted once it gets to the consumer. So our work is, for example, through the Eben Foundation in terms of supporting small farmers in giving them access to things like marketing advice, packaging advice. Packaging is very important in terms of a product to ensure it doesn't go to waste too quickly. And just giving them a way to get the products on the shelf in a way that creates jobs, and that will also then reduce waste in our supply chains.
Andy, safety of food at the food bank is a primary concern always. Tell us, what kind of measures do you have in place?
Yes, because we deal with food that is rejected because of the consumers' issues, we make sure that safety is of utmost importance. So the first thing that happens is that food comes into our warehouses, and that food is weighed in, and then every single item is meticulously checked to make sure that they are well within sell-by dates. That's the important thing. Food that is not well within sell-by dates, we then reject those consignments because it's not good for human consumption, it's not safe, and that food is then channeled to organic farms and fly farms, where they're able to use that food then for organic purposes and redirected once again to save the environment. The food then that is only good for human consumption, well within their sell-by dates, and looks presentable, is the kind of food that we keep into our warehouses. Obviously, the goods with a longer shelf life, sometimes we have product that's there for a 6-month, 12-month shelf life, and that can sit on our shelves for a bit. But food that has a shorter shelf life, 2-3 days, we make sure that our non-profit organization network gets that food in time so that it's still good for human consumption.
Andre, along with reducing waste, creating jobs, donating more food and so forth, would it not also help to reduce the cost of basic necessities for people in South Africa that are food insecure, despite the fact that these are people that work every day? How, as a retailer, do you see yourself play in that space, or even make that possible in the smallest way?
No, I think ensuring or providing our customers with the lowest possible price is something that's part of the ethos of the company. So that's something that we'll continue to do. I think in terms of waste specifically, there's much opportunity for people to create an income, to start a new business in terms of managing waste or getting rid of waste once it's left stores. And you refer to opportunities such as the composting. We're seeing really new innovative technologies coming to the fore, anaerobic digestion, more job creation. There's also the agri-protein, which is a really interesting project in Cape Town in terms of using flies to process waste into animal feed. So not only within the stores, but also in the wider supply chain, I think it's a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to actually reduce waste, increase their incomes, and through that make a lot of people less food insecure.
Andy, conclusion, how do we bring the numbers down? How do we make it work?
Yeah, I think that's the key issue around food waste. It requires a commitment from retailers, manufacturers and wholesalers to make sure that they each set their own targets to reduce food waste. It's unconscionable that our food is being dumped in landfill when it is still good for human consumption, while 11 million people go hungry every day. Our challenge out there is, let's reduce waste, use our organization, Food Bank South Africa, to harness the potential of that food feed hungry people so that we reduce that 11 million people significantly downwards. That's the challenge. So we call on retailers to look at your targets, set targets like Pick and Pay and say, this is unconscionable. This food can be used to feed people. Let's be socially conscious, let's be environmentally conscious, and let's take food waste and feed millions of people every single day.
Thank you very much for joining us. That was the General Manager for Sustainability at Pick and Pay, Andre Null, and the Food Bank's Managing Director, Andy du Plessis, joining us live in Cape Town talking about food security and food wastage. It's astonishing that 61.5 billion rands of food goes to waste when 1 in 4 families are food insecure here in South Africa. Let's take a quick break. You're watching Newsroom here on SABC News.
Welcome to Network, a technology news program that also discusses what's trending in social media in and around Africa. MTN has launched its new movie and television streaming service, Front Row. If it's trending, we will find it. That's Network with me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. only on the SABC News Channel.
Welcome back. South Africa has become an easy target for a strong influx, as well as easy access to counterfeit drugs, threatening the well-being of the general public. According to a report by the Pharmaceutical Security Institute, 1 in 10 drugs sold worldwide now is counterfeit, and up to 30% of all fake drugs are found on the African continent. A report done by the International Policy Network estimated that about 700,000 deaths a year might be prevented if patients were treated with real malaria and tuberculosis drugs instead of counterfeit ones. Now, to tell us a little bit more about the dangers that come with using counterfeit drugs, well, we are joined from our Pretoria studios by Lorraine Osman, the Editor-in-Chief of the South African Pharmaceutical Journal. A very good morning to you, Lorraine. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, and thanks for having me here.
The numbers are simply astounding. Tell me quickly, what are some of the most popular medicines that are counterfeit that people buy?
Well, you know, there's a potential for counterfeit in most medicines, but they certainly have found that things like skin lighteners, which are not actually legal in this country, are being sold, particularly by street vendors, but also from the internet. The other things that tend to be counterfeit are things like sex enhancers. There's counterfeit Viagra out there. And, yeah, it's a massive problem, particularly if you are buying from the internet.
Where do these counterfeit medicines come from? Are they concoctions made up at home, or is there a manufacturing market elsewhere in the world?
Somewhere there is a manufacturing market, and clearly it is an illegal operation. Clearly it is just for the sole purpose of making money. And we have found that many of the counterfeit medicines come in from Far Eastern countries.
And how, as a consumer, what care should you take? How do you tell the fake ones from the real ones?
You know, that's a very difficult thing to do. And in fact, it's mostly the manufacturers of the legitimate products who are obviously on the lookout the whole time, who are the ones who are able to spot it. Because very often the packaging might look identical and the tablet itself might look identical. And as a consumer, you have no way of knowing that. But I guess the most important thing is to actually buy from legitimate sources of medicines. That's the only way that you can protect yourself.
And in today's world, we buy a lot of stuff online. A lot of medicine also is bought online. Tell us about the pitfalls about buying stuff online, and how do you verify that the stuff that you buy online is actually real?
Okay, very important points, both of those. First of all, realize that when you take a medicine that is a counterfeit, what might happen? There are basically 4 possibilities. It might have too much of the active ingredient because there's no quality control. It might have too little. It might have none at all, or it might have a completely different drug in the medicine, and any of those can be a hazard. And just think about it. If you mentioned TB, anti-TB drugs and anti-malarials. If you are suffering from TB and you get something that has too little of the medicine in it, then what is going to happen is you're just going to build up resistance to the medicine and you are not going to be cured and you will die of it eventually if that is what you're taking. If you have too much, the side effects obviously get worse as well. There is also the possibility that the medicine doesn't contain what it says it does. And we had a case in the UK quite recently of a girl who had bought slimming tablets over the internet and who died as a result of taking them. So, yes, there is definitely a health hazard if you're going to be using counterfeit medicines. How do you tell whether a website is legitimate? Well, I think we all enjoy doing online shopping nowadays. It takes a lot of the pain out of it. But when it comes to medicines, make sure that you are only buying from a pharmacy that is registered in South Africa. And there are a number of them that do have websites for their customers. The Pharmacy Council controls it to the point that when you go onto a website, look for a physical address, because every internet pharmacy that is legitimate in South Africa has a brick-and-mortar pharmacy which goes along with it. It will also tell you the name of the responsible pharmacist, and it should tell you when a pharmacist is available for consultation. The other websites, and there are some that even have names that include the word South Africa in them, might lull you into a sense of false security. But when you trace them back, you'll find that they are, because they don't have these details, when they go to the website and they track backwards to find out where it is, they're not in this country. And the moment it says available without a prescription, you can immediately know you are not going to get the correct medicine.
Lorraine, thank you very much. We've run out of time. It is very valuable information you've just given us. If it says no prescription necessary, then it's probably fake, she says. That's where we leave it this morning. Curtailed this morning because of a special show overrun a little bit earlier on. This show, of course, broadcast live from our studios, Auckland Park, Johannesburg, every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Don't forget, we also stream live on YouTube at that time, with the whole show available on demand on our YouTube channel. This is SABC News. You've been watching Newsroom. We love it in the morning.